Welcome, everyone. If you can take your seats, we'll get started shortly.
You're red and I'm green.
Yeah, for Christmas.
Welcome to the Lead Library. My name is Michelle Light, and I am director of the Special Collections here. How many of you have been here before? Okay. How many have never been to the Lead Library before? Great. I thought I saw a number of new faces. Thank you all for coming. Did you know that the UNLV Libraries is open to the general public? As we are the only research library in Southern Nevada, so we have a real commitment to our community in addition to serving all of the students and faculty here at UNLV. One of the ways that we contribute to the region is we collect its history. In Special Collections in particular, we collect a variety of materials, unpublished, published, some very rare and unique, to tell the many diverse stories of our region. And one of those stories is what you are here to learn about today. If you haven't already seen the exhibit, it's downstairs on the first floor when you first come in, and there will be plenty of time to see the exhibit after the program. But I'm very excited about our exhibit, French Connection, and the panelists we have here today who will help shed light on this history. I would like to introduce now, though, the curator for the exhibit, Carla Irwin. She is a faculty member here in the library and works in the Special Collections Department. She's responsible for organizing, preserving, describing, and making available archival collections, such as the ones you'll see downstairs. But before Carla went back to school to become a librarian and an archivist, she was actually in costumes. She was a costume technician for Shakespeare theaters in Cedar City and in Washington, D.C. So we are thrilled that she could use her expertise in costume design and her expertise as a librarian to make this exhibit possible. So now I want Carla to tell you a little bit more about the French connection between Las Vegas and Paris. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, and thanks everyone who've come today. It's really exciting to see so many people here. I'm going to keep this brief because I know you're probably very excited to hear our panelists. I first just want to thank Karen Feder and Dennis McBride for loaning us the costumes for the exhibit. They're from the Nevada State Museum in Las Vegas, and I've received so many wonderful compliments about them, and everyone just loves them. So thank you again for loaning those to us for the exhibit. This exhibit was really fun for me to put together for a few reasons. One, I do have a background in costumes, as Michelle said. Two, the shows in Las Vegas are so interesting and exciting. And three, I had so many wonderful entertainment collections to draw from special collections. I picked 11 different collections for this exhibit, and they talk about Las Vegas entertainment from the 1940s up until the 2000s. So it made my job kind of easy and fun. So that's all I really want to say. Again, thank you for coming. Please tell your friends to see the exhibit. It will be up until October 31st. And now I'm just going to introduce Soo Kim Chung. She is the head of the Public Services and Special Collections. She is also the curator of our entertainment collections, and she is going to lead the panel discussion today.
Well, it's so great to see such a nice crowd on a Sunday afternoon. And before I introduce our panelists, I wanted to say a few words about UNLV Library Special Collections and our mission, which Michelle talked about a little bit ago. Everything you've seen in this room, both analog and digital, including the display case featuring Miss Bluebell's scrapbooks, which were created by Dick Powell for the family, and the materials on display downstairs are the result of our mission to document the history of the region and, in particular, Las Vegas entertainment. And we're continually working to collect this history, both through documents and oral history interviews. So if you're interested in helping us with this mission, which we hope you are, if you have photographs, costume designs, notes, programs that you would like to donate to the collection, please take a look at the back of the program, which has more information on the collections and also on information on how to donate. So let me start by introducing our panel. And to many of you in the audience, the man to my left needs no introduction. But for those of you who don't know him, he is the multi-talented Jerry Jackson, who has designed, staged, and choreographed shows all around the world, and who from 1975 to 2009 served as the creative force for the Folies Bergère show in Las Vegas. He served as creative director, choreographer, costume designer, sometimes set designer, lyricist, and composer. And to this list, we can also add donor, because Jerry's donation of his personal papers made possible a large portion of the French Connection exhibit downstairs. Next to him is Miss Gillian Hershowy, who I like to think of as the queen of the French Revue in Las Vegas, because she began her career in La Nouvelle Eve at the El Rancho Vegas, and then she danced with the Florence and Frederick dancers in the Folies Bergère at the Tropicana, and then appeared as principal dancer in Casino de Paris, both in Paris and Las Vegas, and then, of course, was a principal in the Lido de Paris at the Stardust Hotel. And next to Jillian, I have Trina Howard and Donnie Sachs. Now, these ladies are very unique in the history of Las Vegas entertainment, because I doubt that there were too many sisters who appeared in competing French production revues at the same time on the Las Vegas Strip. With Trina was a showgirl, later a dancer, and a principal understudy at the Folies Bergère, and later was one of the featured dancers at the Sahara Hotel in the fabulous Sahara Girls. And Donnie was a Bluebell in Hallelujah Hollywood, and then a Bluebell in the Lido, and later a principal and line captain at the Stardust and the Lido de Paris. So we have a wonderful panel. And I'll ask some questions, but I will leave time for questions from the audience and comments, which I'm sure you will have. So I thought I would start out with something that is really challenging for a lay audience, but there's a lot of show people in this audience. But to people who don't know, can you tell us about the difference between a showgirl and dancer? Because we use those terms people mix them up and all the time, and so I'd like to get a definition from.
So that's the question for me?
Yeah, or any of
No, okay. No, I'll go for that. Basically, a dancer was a dancer, dressed. We got a little bit different a little bit later on, but it was a dress dancer. A showgirl was the most beautiful, with beautiful headdresses, costumes, topless, and would be the walking showgirl. The dancer was the dancer, and that's the difference. It was never, everybody says today, oh, you were a showgirl. No, we are determined in different categories, and it was definitely the dancer and the showgirl. both glorious.
Can someone also comment on the terms principal and adagio, which are also terms that might be a little confusing to a lay audience?
A principal dancer is the lead dancer, meaning that she's featured throughout the show. An adagio team is a team, a male and female normally, and they also are considered leads in the show because they're featured numerous times through a production. Any questions about that?
Thank you.
Also, the Adagio team, if I might add, it involves a lot of lifts. That's if you watch, So You Think You Can Dance, Dancing with the Stars, when they do, spectacular lifts. That's what an Adagio team is, male and female.
And I'd like to say that Jerry does a fantastic choreography for Adagio teams, and I should know.
So Jerry, I want to talk to you about your time, how you started with the Foleys. I know that you started off as the assistant to the famous choreographer Hermes Pan for the centennial edition of the Foleys in Paris in 1966. No, 60?
No, it was here.
It's here, okay.
Yes, Hermes was asked to choreograph the Folies Bergère here. Michel Giarmathi was the creator, the director, and he designed the scenery and costumes in Paris. And he also directed the show, but he needed a choreographer. So Hermes asked me to be the assistant choreographer. So I assisted Hermes. After that, they seemed to like my work, so Dave Johnson, the entertainment director at the time, asked me if I would replace the Florence and Frederick dancers with the Jerry Jackson dancers in the Folies Bergère, which I did. That opened in '67, and at the same time I was asked to choreograph the 100th anniversary of the Folies Bergère in Paris. And I remember that plane trip because putting the Jerry Jackson dancers in, I flew back here. I started rehearsing in Paris, flew back here, put the dancers in, flew back to Paris, and fell asleep in the aisle holding a rehearsal. I slept 3 days. So that's my initial involvement with the Foleys.
So it was in 1975, though, you created your first whole edition of the Foleys yourself.
Yes. This was the first time that Alan Lee was the entertainment director at the time, and the first time that the Foleys was to be produced in the United States. And so he asked me to do the show. I wrote the show, devised it, and wanted it to be a little bit more different than disjunctive production numbers and acts, which most of the shows were. So I came up with the idea to do a theme, and I thought I would do an inherent theme, a salute to the music hall. And then I had an MC, Buddy Vest, who led the audience through the show, in and out of each period. It started with the tableau in 1765 or 1770 something, and then worked its way right up through the can-can 1900, jazz 1920s with the red mirrored pianos and the girls, and right up to present day. But I had to get a costume designer, and Sherry Lewis, who used to do Lamb Chop and Hush Puppy, Sherry introduced me because I used to work with her, and that's how we worked. When the puppet talked, and then Sherry would talk, and we'd do. So she told me about Nolan Miller, and I had a meeting with him, and so he became the costume designer, and he was wonderful to work with, because I would do preliminary sketches, just rough sketches for him, because I went to UCLA and studied art was my major. So I could do rough sketches, and then he would take it like 300% farther, and just would do beautiful things. He understood period construction, because I wanted the 75 Foleys to be authentic, to really be based on period. Whatever period we were doing, I wanted it to have an authenticity about it.
So I want to kind of take it to the ladies
Sure,
and
please.
ask you. I wanted to ask them, you know, the Foleys had such a long history reaching back into the 19th century, and the Lido, of course, going back into the 1940s. Were you intimidated at all when you started in with the show, or were you aware of its long history?
Microphone. Absolutely, yes, I was. And my sister and I were born in a very small rural farming community in Utah. So when we found out our parents were going to move here, we were ecstatic because we were little tiny girls, but we wanted to come so we could dance in one of the review shows. So yes, we were very well aware of the history, maybe not to the extent that we were later on, but we knew we wanted to come here and study really hard and work hard at becoming a dancer so we could come and be in the show. And I'm going to revert real quickly, if I may, before I lose this thought, because I know you'll love it, when Jerry was talking about Nolan Miller. So I'm new, I go into the show, and I had been in the previous edition, but only for about 6 months before it closed. So we got to meet, you know, and the beautiful costumes started coming in, and I had a surreal moment that I'm sitting there. I think I may be all of 19, maybe 18 or 19, and we were trying on our big, beautiful ball gowns, which all these lovely ladies up here wore as well, and it was our first fitting. So I have my gorgeous gown on, and Nolan's there, and he said, well, you know, if you can, walk over here and try to just set for a second. You know, they had the big hoop skirts in them, so I'm like tottering over there in bare feet, and we sat down and we were doing our shoe fitting. Amazing, here comes my surreal moment. So I'm sitting down there. Nolan Miller is literally on his knees, opening my shoebox with my name on it, slipping these beautiful satin slipper onto my foot. I was like sitting there, and even to talk about it, I still get all these tingles because I was like, I have arrived. I have made it. Here is Nolan Miller putting my slipper on. So I had to tell that story because it's just, I love it. But yes, we were aware and we had a ball every night.
Well, I also wanted to, this is also for the girls and also for Jerry, what was it like going from a rehearsal wearing just your dance clothes, just your regular dance rehearsal clothes, into that first dress rehearsal where you're actually wearing the costumes? And maybe Jill.
A shock. Because we'd done it so brilliantly with just rehearsal clothes and rehearsal shoes, and then to put a costume on, it was like, it took a while to begin to really feel it and to know what we're doing with the costume and to work it as hard as we did with just the usual rehearsal clothes. It took time, it worked, but it wasn't easy. Some of it was not easy, as we all know.
And we always lost a few parts.
Yes.
Along the way. Yes. You put on your costume, you think everything's fine, and sure enough, it's like a yard sale. Things all over the stage, not pinned in properly, not hooked properly. Right?
Absolutely. And,
Always lost.
you know, I always asked to have the costumes made at least 2 weeks prior to opening because I knew what it took for the rehearsal, to rehearse all the not just wearing them and dancing in them, but also the costume changes. In the 1997 Foleys, there were 20-second costume changes. And those girls kept coming over the stage. It looked like a cast of thousands because they were off stage working harder, changing costumes than they did when they came on stage. But I mean, so all of that had to be rehearsed. So, you know, the costumes were a biggie.
Yes, the dress rehearsals were really quite something, weren't they?
Yeah.
Just getting it going and managing to work with everything and putting it out.
Yes, absolutely.
And Jerry, as the choreographer, did you sometimes end up changing parts of the numbers because they just couldn't accommodate the weight of a costume or something?
Oh, sure. Yes. It was all adjusting. To begin with, I tried to design costumes that didn't have metal in them. When the costumes came from Paris in the 66 Foleys, the headdresses had metal, you know, and all the heavy rhinestones. And, and so many girls had, you know, terrible neck problems from that. So when I did, especially the 83 Foleys, when I was designing everything, I had styrofoam, as the base of everything, and then had that covered, which was, you could pick it up with your little finger, and tried to make the headdress as light as possible because, but then there were some times that they would put on a costume, and just the weight of it. For instance, I'll tell you a story about the movie Can-Can, and when Juliet Prowse starred in it. Those girls, Sheriff designed the costumes. They were heavy velvet. So when the girls started turning, they couldn't stop. They just kept turning. So I made sure that the fabric was a lot lighter, and also I choreographed once they in the dress rehearsal, or even before the costumes came, I had a rehearsal skirt made up that would approximate the actual skirt, so I could choreograph when they grab the skirt, when they put it down, when they stop it from turning, when they bring it back, when they lift it, so that, without that, they would be doing the moves with their hands, and then when they get the costume on, they would still be doing the moves with their hands without touching the fabric. I learned that lesson.
And so, Jerry, can you tell us about how you came into actually doing all the costume design by yourself, and why Nolan Miller left as your costume designer?
Well, Nolan, by 1983, 82, Nolan was under exclusive contract to Aaron Spelling with shows like Dynasty, and so he would moonlight with me a couple of times. He also did my pinup series and other shows that I did in Puerto Rico and the Bahamas, but by 1982 he couldn't even do that. So, and he said to me, Jerry, why don't you just do your own costumes? You know what you're doing, because I would always do sketches for him. And so I went to Bob Mackey. I worked with him a lot doing Stars acts, but Mackey was going into retail at the time, so I couldn't use him. So I thought, okay, I guess I'll put that hat on too. Little did I know what it involved, because I shopped every sequin, every feather I ordered. I was very hands-on. I remember in the 1930s number, there weren't enough sequins that I wanted that had the right feel and texture and coloring. And so they went to Barnum and Bailey's Circus, to their costume department. They went to costume houses back in New York to get enough of that particular sequin for the 1930s number. But, that's a tough job. Costuming is a tough job.
And so, what did you draw on for your inspiration in designing the historical costumes for the?
Well, first I want to know the sociological history at the time, what was going on, and that would affect the way that I would design the costumes. For instance, ladies in 1850 had weak chins, sloping shoulders, and the sleeves came down here so that the shoulders look weaker because men were threatened by women, and they didn't want them to look too strong. By 90 still are. Yeah, as well they should be. and in 1900, you notice they had the leg of mutton sleeves with the big shoulders, and they had larger hats, whereas in 1850 they had small little conceits of flowers and things on their head. But then they had the big, so women, and by 1920s it was cut off the skirt, roll down the hose, and strap the breast down, and it was flappers. So I wanted to know all of the sociological information behind. Once I knew that, then I would go to museums. I would talk to fabricators. I had to find out what all the period construction was, so that and then make the costume move within that context. So that was what my research entailed.
Great. Well, this is kind of a fun question for everybody, so I'm sure everybody's got an anecdote. Do you have a funny anecdote about an issue that you might have had with a costume on stage, or just something funny that happened on stage in your many hundreds of performances? So everybody can answer differently. I know.
Many.
Well, I don't know if it was, I guess it's funny now, but when it happened, it was anything but funny. There were 3 of us on stage, and we were entering to do Rhapsody in Blue, and I had a big cape on. And how we keep our hair pieces on is we wear what's called a turd on our head, and a turd is made of hair and a net, and you put that on top of your head with French pins in your turd, and then your hair sticks into the front of the turd, and then your crown goes over the top of that. So now the Lido showroom was every night packed, and here we are on stage. There's a male dancer, 2 female dancers entering to do our 3-part Rhapsody in Blue. The singer takes my cape off that I have on, and while he takes my cape, he takes my hair and my crown also. So now listen, I have on a G-string, some beads around my top, and this hair, and scarves on my arm, and now I have a turd on my head, and no crown, right? So I realize I'm really light. What's going on? And then I'm like, oh shoot! So I exit as quickly as I can, and the 2 of them finished the number, and I went into the wings and got my found my hair, put my piece back on, and entered for I Got Rhythm like nothing happened. And I mean, everybody was dying. I mean, the stage, the wings were peeing their pants because it was just, but it really was upsetting. But, the show must go on.
Awesome. Okay. And I know everyone that has performed professionally has a number of these stories, and at the time they really are not funny, as Donnie stated, but now, years later, we can laugh, and they're some of our most favorite memories, and which I have many. And probably the most difficult headpiece to wear, and Jerry, you know what I'm going to say, right? Our giant, they were beautiful, but we called them yucca plants. Yucca plants. They were beautiful airtade type headpiece, which I think we might have some of those on display. And they were a costume that when you put it on, but it was Jerry knew not to choreograph it, to turn our head, because we would have poked each other's eyes out. So you literally could just kind of move back and forth or cascade the stairs, and they were spectacular, though. But one night, for some weird reason...
Nolan Miller design, not mine.
No, but really beautiful. Yes, he made a softer, kinder, gentler version later on, right, Jer? But, and this was probably not opening night, but maybe the second night, and we came over and cascaded down the stairs very perfectly. And back in those days, you could not look down at these stairs, which the girls can now, and I guess they kind of have to for safety reasons, but we couldn't. So I come down the stairs, similar story to Donnie's, and I had my little do at the back, at the base. So I'm coming down there, and I'm going, why does this feel like it's slipping around so bad? It's really slipping around. So we finished our promenade and went around there and posed for a second, and I realized I was feeling something way down here on my shoulder. So my hat had slipped all the way back, and so I was standing at this really weird. So I just made truly a quick exit, stage left, into the wing, managed to get my hat back on, and got back on and made it into the formation to finish the finale. But I think almost everyone who had a costume faux pas somehow tried to make it back to finish the number in grand style. So that's just one story.
I have to try to think, because it was just a little bit different, because being in a group, which was the Florence and Frederick at the Tropicana at the time, we didn't have very large costumes and big hats. But one incident was, we did a Charleston number, Frantic. It was choreographed at that time by Ron Lewis. And I had a little hat on, and I thought, I'm going out for the night. I think I'll just curl my hair underneath the hat. So I had all these curlers underneath my hat, and was winging it. I was just Charlestering all over the place, and suddenly I lost the hat. Small as it was, it came off, and I was left with all these curlers in my hair. It wasn't pretty. I continued to do. I did the number, I finished it, but somehow it was not a good look. I have one other incident, but it was a little bit later in life. Quick change. Had just done a pas de six, 3 couples. We just finished. We had to run off and come back for another scene with boots on and a different costume, like 2 minutes, as you know. Came running back on, had the boots on, did the finale number, whatever it was, ran back to the dressing room, felt something really squishy in my boot. So I didn't know what that was, but anyway, I took the costume off to find, and I don't know if Luann will remember this, but anyway, it was a mouse. I don't know. I won't go into any more than that.
One more fast one. I have to tell you this one fast one. And this is for my Follies girls. And this would happen to all of us from time to time, where we'd be running out, and it was usually the finale number where we had these beautiful, gorgeous rainbow-type feathers, and we would run out there. And a few times I'd look at the dancer in front of me or behind me or even myself, and there would be a hanger stuck somewhere back in those hanger on your backpack, and you kind of feel it hitting you from time to time. But I think that maybe happened to just about all of us at one point in time during our career, but we managed to make it through anyway. So that's another fun one.
Like the toilet paper. Yeah, like the toilet paper on your shoe.
The hanger on the back.
Hanger on the back.
I remember one, this was the Foleys that I assisted, Hermes Pan, Felicia Atkins, famous showgirl. She was walking around the passerelle, and she had on this, incredible costume that was designed in Paris. But for some reason, she started walking up the front of her dress, which made her start to fall. And all of the men at ringside were...
Well, Felicia was endowed very well.
Memorable. Something you don't forget. Then, of course, the first time that I did the 1850s number, which was the Grand Manner in the Foley in 1975, the girls had on huge hoop skirts. And the first time that they rehearsed in the huge hoop skirts, they walked up the front of the skirt. It all fell on their face because, that was, I couldn't do a mock-up of those. That would have been too expensive. But every time you take a step, you have to lift up, grab a hoop with the tip of your finger and lift it up to take a step. So the other one was when we had fountains where the orchestra pit used to be that shot up. And during a rehearsal, I was talking to the cast, and I was backing up, and I stepped off the stage into the pit, and I did not very far down, and I, got back up and, continued, and we all laughed. And that night when the show went on in the finale, when the jets were supposed to come up, I had knocked some out of whack, and it went all over the audience. So they got more for their money.
I have a scary story. I have just a quick scary story. I don't know if you guys remember. You might remember. In the Leader Day pre-show in 1976, we had a disc that came out of the sky, and 2 girls were on the disc. They came down into the passerelle, and they greeted the audience, and it was this whole, presentation to start the show. And I was on the disc that one night with another understudy girl, and the disc fell from I was really high up. I don't know, Jerry, I don't know how high that stage was, but it dropped, and I caught the ladder, and I caught my partner with the other hand, and I held her and pulled her up to the disc. And we would have died, but that's the scariest story. It was that disc dropped, something happened, and it just went from underneath us, and we had just started down, and you had to crawl down into the disc on the ladder, and then it came right from the ceiling down onto the passerelle, and it was just, I mean, oh my God, I don't know how we survived, but talk about the show must go on. We finished, it went up, the curtain that went down for a second, and the show started again. The disc wasn't done again, but we're the two girls that do the dance I lost my hair in. We went and finished the show. I mean, I was shaking so bad. I had cuts all over me. Oh. Anyway, that was the scariest one. Whoa.
Well, so how about kind of a fun question after that scary story? But like, can you each tell us about a favorite costume? Because of the many shows, I'm sure that you had a favorite costume.
So many.
Yeah.
So many. Especially the ones that are really designed for you are special.
How about you, Jerry? A favorite costume you designed?
Oh, I was thinking one of my favorite costumes was the one with the yucca plant, you know, with the headdress that Trina said fell down her back. But that was very Erte inspired. I had done a rough sketch of it for Nolan Miller, but he just, I mean, the workmanship on the fabric that came up, all of the beading and the jeweling, it was like something from the last century or the 1800s. It was all hand done and was absolutely superb. It was probably one of my favorite costumes. And I guess the other one, which I, feel bad about in a way because I wasn't thinking, were the rainbow capes in the 1983 Foley's for the Showgirls with the tricorn abstraction for that. Yeah, they were solid sequin, and it didn't occur to me. I thought, well, that's going to look good, but the girls have to hold their arms out the entire time. But when they came over the stairs, that did look pretty spectacular. Yeah.
You know, the tricorn hat that you talked about, it's on display downstairs.
Oh yeah, that's another one. But was in the same number.
Okay.
Yes.
And also the picture of the headdress, the Erte-inspired headdress, I believe that's also in one of the photographs. Yeah. So you'll see everything on display in the exhibit downstairs. But something I wanted to ask about for Jillian and for Donnie, you both were at the Lido, and so you worked with the legendary Miss Bluebell. And so I was hoping Jillian could tell us a little bit about Miss Bluebell and tell any anecdotes that we have. We're fortunate to have Miss Bluebell's son and daughter here in the audience, and she just tell us a little bit about her for the people that don't know about her.
Well, that's I wish you would come up and do that. The family. She was unique. She was wonderful. I lived in her apartment in Paris. Thank you, Patrick. It was fantastic time with her. Because I was more on the principal side when I did do the Lido, which was in 1970. I didn't have so much to do because I wasn't a Bluebell or one of the nudes at the time. But I do remember one wonderful moment. We went on a cruise. It was Bluebell and myself in a cabin, and it was Don and his partner Craig in the other one. And the four of us went on this wonderful cruise to the Panama Canal. And all I can remember was Blue in the morning, 8 o'clock, we would wake up. She would hand me a cigarette, and I was smoking at that time. And we would puff and puff and puff until we were feeling just great. And we would get up and have our breakfast, and then we would go and hit the pool, and we had a wonderful time together. But Miss Bluebell was unique. She was very, very strict with her dancers. They were gorgeous. Worked with many of them. Just loved to be around her, see how she worked with them and controlled them, and always with a great heart, and just good memories.
And so, Donnie, can you tell us a little bit? So, if some people aren't familiar with what a Bluebell was or what a Bluebell did, can you tell us a little bit about that?
The Bluebell dancers are famed dancers from Paris that came over, I guess, in 1958. And my introduction to Miss Bluebell, Madame Bluebell, was in 1974. 1973, Trent and I went on the road with the show. She broke her ankle. We couldn't continue with what we were doing, so I auditioned for the first replacements for Hallelujah Hollywood. And by this time, it might have been 74, 73, 74. And there were many thousands of people at the audition, and I was 17. And I danced. I went to auditions so I could get free dance classes. I didn't care if I got hired. I just wanted to go get a free dance class. So I thought I'll go try out for the show. Well, I think there were 3 or 4 girls hired that day, and that was when I met Madame Bluebell and Dawn Arden. They were at the audition, and I was one of the first replacements to go into Hallelujah Hollywood at the MGM before the fire. So within just a few months of working in the show, I started doing a lot of different things, and just really, I'm really organized in my life in general, and I started helping and understudy and doing all kinds of things like that. So we became friendly because of that. And then I moved from there over to the Leaders Show 2 years later and became the dressed dancers line captain. And so Miss Bluebell would say to me, to the other girls, I want you to do your lips like Donnie does her lips, because she wanted her lips done a certain way. She likes the lip line, just done perfectly. You must do your lips like Donnie does her lips. But she taught me how to do my lips. So it was just very particular, very just a perfectionist, and I'm so honored to have worked for Madame Bluebell and Dawn Arden for many years, and it was great.
Donnie, weren't they all? There was a height that they all had.
Oh yeah, we had a height requirement. I later went on to be the company manager, director of the Leader Day pre-show. I started as worked my way up, and I couldn't even audition anyone unless they were 5'8". Yeah, the girls had to be 5'8", and the boys had to be 6 foot. I couldn't even. We measured.
Yes.
I'm between looking at people's boobs and measuring people. I had to look at their boobs, and I had to, But that's showbiz. It's part of what we did. It's just part of your costume. So.
I have to say it's a shame that there's just the most wonderful Jubilee still left, that there aren't other shows of that caliber. Because it's very changed today. It's very changed.
And just to note that we have many photographs of the Bluebells in the exhibit, and of course we have the wonderful collection of scrapbooks of Miss Bluebell, some of which are on display in the back of the room. And a very dear friend of the family, Mr. Dick Powell, was the one who put those together for Miss Bluebell and documented her entire life. So we're very fortunate to have that, and as well as Dawn Arden's paper and Jerry's paper to document this part of our history. One thing I wanted to think about is what else? I've kind of gone through some of the fun stories, and you've had so many fun stories. And something that people always ask about dancers is, did you have to have treatment because of the weight of the headdresses? Did you have to have medical, frequent?
I have to say for me, I got lucky. No, never a bad neck. I don't have bad knees. I don't have hips. I have hips, but not a problem with them. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, God.
Blessed.
Yeah.
Not everybody's the same. Yeah. That's great.
Headdresses, just sciatic nerves and stuff from dancing.
Yes, that goes with it.
That kind of stuff, but not really not neck problems. Thank God.
Great.
I demonstrated everything full out up to the point where in the can, the girls had to dive off of a 14-foot balcony and the boys caught them. The girls wouldn't do it the first time I went into rehearsal for that, and they said, "Oh, we're not going to do that." I said, "Okay, if somebody that's old enough to be your grandfather does it, will you do it?" So I had 2 stagehands stand down on the stage. I said, when you feel my body hit, just bend your knees a little bit to absorb the pressure. And I did a swan dive off of the balcony, and they caught me, and I did a walkover out of it.
I remember that like yesterday.
Do you really?
I totally remember that moment like it was yesterday.
Yeah.
I
that's-
do. I do.
Because I danced full out.
I do too.
I felt if the step felt good on me, I didn't want any awkward changes. You're on your right foot, and then the next step's on your right foot. Well, so a lot of choreographers choreograph sitting down. I had to dance everything full out to make sure that it felt good, because if it feels good, then it'll be more fun to perform. So, and the payback is that I have 6 herniated discs, yay! And arthroscopic knee operation each knee, and but it's goes with the turf.
Jerry,
And
can you still do the splits?
I can still do the splits. As I said earlier, it's not as pretty as it used to be, but. But I can still do. Oh, no.
That's that.
And I'm still vertical. So there you are.
Wonderful.
Fantastic.
Well, now I thought I'd open it up to questions from the audience, because I know there's a lot of former performers in here that might like to say something, or and other audience members that would like to ask questions. So I'm going to go ahead and let the microphone go around the room.
Yes, you had mentioned earlier that Jubilee is probably one of the last of the good old day type productions. Steve Wynn has brought back to life something similar. I'm just wondering why you think that there aren't as many as there used to be. Is it because of cost, or what exactly?
Yes, I think it's because of cost is one point of it, because nobody puts the money into it today on that. We got too many Cirque as well. I mean, everything is Cirque du Soleil, and that's beginning to wear thin too now. But at the one time when there was always the Lido, there was the Tropicana, there was the Dunes. Everybody had a French show. They were all wonderful, every one of them. There were certain aspects to everyone that we all wanted to see. And now that it's gone out so much, I think we're missing that extravaganza, the beauty, the pretty girls, good-looking boys, good dancing. And I just think, yes, you are right. Showstoppers, I think, is extremely, it's great. And it does come kind of near in its way. It is more of a Broadway fact. But I miss the old days of those fabulous shows.
Yeah, I think that the French Revues, like everything, has a life cycle. And it's the Folie Bergère went from 1867 till 2009. So that was a long life. Yes. So, but everything has a beginning, middle, and end, and it all hits kind of its glory days. In Paris, the Folie Bergère introduced such people as Pavlova. Will Rogers was in the Folie Bergère, Maurice Chevalier, great stars. But whatever was current during the day, that was, they were in a French Revue, and that's where they got their start. Anyway, that's, it's just a life cycle, I think, part of it. Yeah.
It's a corporate world.
Yes, a corporate world, exactly.
I just wanted to know if you guys, with all the dancing on TV these days being exposed worldwide, people come in and I don't know if we brought back French Connections, if they would actually get thrilled with the style of the traditional choreography that we used to do.
I think it's changed. We know it's changed. It's a whole different ballgame now.
Yeah, but with the French Revue, the French Revue that opened up in 1867 certainly wasn't the same French Revue that went on in 1915. They always change with the times, and they stayed current. So that if we had a French Revue today, there would be maybe some period pieces, but they would be done in a different way because it's a product of the time. Everything is a product of the times. No matter how much you try to make it authentic, it's still going to be an abstraction of what was originally done. And things would be reinvented in order for today's, styles in dance and fashion.
you guys said that showgirls were the ones that just walked and then the bluebells danced. When I was doing the Lido, I was doing that. But then when the nudes saw the choreography on the bluebells, they're like, well, we want to do that. So Kira said, go ahead and spice up the nudes.
There's Pierre over there.
Yeah.
Pierre is there.
There he is, right there.
Oh, yeah, wonderful.
Right there.
Oh, another Pierre. Oh, Pierre Rambert is coming here next week.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Well, that's Pierre from the Dunes.
Hi, my name's Bob Stewart. I was a costume designer for Barry Ashton
Oh, my God.
and did many shows with Barry at the Aladdin Hotel and the Silver Slipper, and I opened the Union Plaza with him. And one of the things that I found very strange to be an ice skater. I was with Holiday on Ice and worked with Don Arden Holiday on Ice. I started skating and then came to Vegas with Larry Maldonado. And the first show I did was at the Union Plaza, and the showgirls were facing out and the boys are facing this way with our G-strings on. And you got to remember, there's no air conditioning backstage. It's only in the showroom. So the minute the curtain goes up, what do you get but a big cold rush of air up over your butt or on your tits? And the showgirl next to me says, gotcha, wait till you feel that on your tits. And then the other thing you would get is a big burst of smoke because everybody smoked in the showroom. So you're like this for the first 2 seconds. Can I get my breath? But the other thing that I did was when I was working with Barry was doing costumes, and that is we found National Wire. National Wire made all the backpacks and all the big headdress pieces for Bob Mackey, because I used to work with Bobby too, because Bobby would come down and borrow our costumes for the Carol Burnett show and the Cher show. So that's how I know Bobby. But the thing is to try to make the headdresses as light as possible, but sometimes Lloyd Lambert would make them so heavy, I'd go, Jesus Christ, how much more can hot glue and steel wires weigh? But it was a great time, and we enjoyed doing it. And I'm now doing a show out with Miss Tanguette at the Anthem Theater today. It opens Showgirl Follies that she's doing out there. Okay.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Grant. Okay, now I know who the culprit was. I was going to ask you, who designed that costume that we wore at Melodyland for Barry Ashton? 15-foot wings with steel inside
That was
nobody
Lloyd
could
Lambert.
wear but me. It's amazing that I'm not crippled.
Yeah, that was Lloyd.
Unbelievable. 50 pounds each.
Yeah, I choreographed shows for Barry and was actually his lead dancer and company manager in a lot of shows. But yeah, that Melodyland show, I remember. Yeah, those costumes were brutal.
Who did that costume?
Lloyd Lambert was the one that designed it and had it fabricated.
They thought it was Wonder Woman, right?
It was, if you could pick it up and wear it, you were Wonder Woman. It was.
She loves it.
It really made your boobs look great.
Yeah, well, hey.
Straight up in the air.
Yeah. Winged victory with breast.
You won.
Funny.
That costume was, nobody could wear it.
Except for you, Kathy.
There she is. Oh, thank you.
Hi. I imagine there was a family and a community when you guys were all together, okay, at that time, because you're all in the same business, and years ago what was going on in Las Vegas. And is there any type of a society or an organization for the performers or any of you that still live here in Vegas that you guys get together and share stories or having alumni type of thing?
Yes, there is, absolutely. And it's not only with our Follies cast, but I'm going to be a little partial now. I think the Follies cast has stayed a lot closer together than maybe some of the other shows. You know, we lovingly call ourselves the Follies, Dollies, and Guys, and whenever and if ever possible, we always plan to get together, whether it's a larger event or just to have a quick lunch or something or say hi. We continually, through the years, no matter, I lived back east for many years, but I always wanted to know what was going on with all of my sisterhood out here in Vegas, and my husband Bucky and I called on Jerry's advice for many times back east when I was producing shows back there for Jerry's expertise on many different occasions. And so we really have kept in contact with each other throughout our entire lives, and we all have such a love in our hearts for one another too. I think it's truly remarkable. We really are a family in every way, shape, and form. We are.
I'm just curious, you know, how Cirque has this monopoly on our town. The thing that's disappointing to me, and I really would like to know your opinion of it, is, of course, being madly in love with all these shows from the past, and everybody saying you live in the past. My big disappointment is that when Don Arden, Frederick Apcar, these great producers, Jerry Jackson, when they were here and they had their little mini monopoly, because Don would have the Lido, he would have Hallelujah, he would have, you know, Pizzazz or whatever, there was a competition, not between other producers so much, but almost between themselves, that they wanted each show to upgrade even better than their last production. Absolutely. Even with you, when you did your show, each time you would open a new version, you were like in a competition. How can I make it better? How can I make it stand out?
Absolutely.
Cirque doesn't do that. Doesn't that disappoint you? And don't you think that has a lot to do with the caliber of entertainment that's available in Vegas today? Because they don't see a need to compete and to try and make their shows any better.
Well, I think they try to make their shows different, even though there is a lot of sameness. But, you know, they have different themes for each show. And I think they try to go for top quality. But that's not the same thing as competing with yourself and trying to do better each time and try not to repeat yourself. And which in the end I had to do because there was no budget. And so they said, just go to the warehouse and recycle. And I said, well, there's nothing left. You've already cannibalized the warehouse. There was a nut in a boat and some spoon on the floor. And I said, you know, I can't do much with this. But yes, you're absolutely right. We all did try to top ourselves. And, you know, Venus did such brilliant costuming for the Casino de Paris. I love Venus's work. I directed and choreographed the 80th anniversary of the Casino de Paris in Paris, and Venus was the costume designer. That was such a treat. It was, and we had to follow the show before. The costumes were designed by Yves Saint Laurent, and but Venus came up with it. I mean, he just did spectacular things. It was wonderful. But then again, we're always trying to top ourselves. You're absolutely right.
So I have a question about the cost of these costumes. Would they cost more back then than they would today? How much actually did it cost to produce a costume?
Well, I know that in, they got much less earlier on, you know, and now with the price of, you know, materials, labor, and I know that in the 1930s number, where I had the showgirls get out of a 1936 Rolls Royce to I've Got Plenty of Nothing, played as a strip beat, their costumes cost about $3,000 each, which was a hell of a lot of money in 1975. So yeah, that was a big dollar. But I had a decent budget on that show, and yeah, but nowadays the costuming is exorbitant. I remember in 1997 when they asked me to redo the show, I asked them what my budget was. They said, you don't have one. I said, the Lido's feather and rhinestone budget is $1.5 million. How can I compete with that with $370? You know, it was, you know, I did come up with something. I don't know what I said.
I don't know how.
I think I stole things. I don't remember.
And how typical was it that costumes were made here in Vegas? Did we have the artisans to support those crafts, those specialty crafts?
There were a lot of them that were made in Vegas. In the 1983 Foley's, I had costumes fabricated in-house at the Tropicana. Then I had Nolan Miller's workshop also made a few costumes for me, even though he couldn't design. Yes, that was in Los Angeles. Then Hetty Jo Starr was in Green Bay, and she did the rainbow capes and the opening number with the tricorn hats. So it was farmed out all over. And then I went to NBC. They had a costume department that, you know, fabricated. So they were done all over. How about the Lido? Were they done in Paris?
Yes.
Yes, see, the Lido stayed in Paris. The Folie Bergère was fabricated in Paris up until 75.
And I think the Lido too, I'm not sure. I know it was definitely through 75 as well.
Yeah, because the Lido's costumes had to be sent out of the country for 2 weeks because they were in here on a bond. That's when the costumes left the country. Instead of closing the Lido, Siegfried and Roy asked me if I could do an act and a show around them without the Lido, and which I did, and a NBC TV special, and that got them their own showroom.
And that's where we worked together.
Yes.
I was in that show.
Yes, right.
Yes.
Yeah, Siegfried and Roy special.
One of the things you got to understand too is a lot of the feathering that's done at the Lido is illegal in the United States. And those feathers had to be brought in on a bond, and they either had to be sent out, and even with Holiday on Ice, all of our costumes had to be listed and put in bond, and they either had to be sent back out or burned. And they used to drive a truck up to the back of the Lido and with a furnace in it and actually take the costumes and throw them in there and burn them. And we were ripping rhinestones off them like they were like, just take those, get those.
And if you could take one out, that they didn't see, I know that happened.
Yeah, that happened, but most of them got burnt, and that's the way they got rid of them, and or send them back, and that you would have, and they were like $1 million bonds. They wouldn't even pay you interest on it. That's what infuriated Morris Chalfin, that he had 3 Holiday on Ice shows here in the United States. He had $3 million tied up in just bonds on French costumes.
I was wondering
Because
if
Falco did our costumes then.
If Patrick Liboici could speak about that a little bit, about the Lido and the costumes, and about what they were just saying about them, what happened to them afterwards.
Thank you. And I appreciate the speakers. Jerry Jackson, thank you very much for what you have done. And Jill, also, I've known you for a long time and appreciate that, and you ladies too. If you go back to the 1950s when the first Lido show came here, they were bought as a company, totally encapsulated, with the dancers had to be rehearsed, all the productions had to be rehearsed in Europe, and they were brought in. The costumes were coming on a bond. And so at the end of the product, and they only came, if the first shows came only for 6 months. So they came into United States, all rehearsed, ready for production as a total package. And you had to get everybody out, mostly, to rehearse in Europe, burn the costumes or take them back. And it was too expensive to send them back by freight to Europe. So the only way was to burn them here under the auspices of the customs here.
Thank you. I think
in answer a little bit to what you said before, as far as the shows are concerned, it's more difficult, as Jerry will witness. and Jill. So it's more difficult. The show business has changed, even the production shows, tremendously. Television has killed a lot of the clubs where the acts used to rehearse and perfect themselves and become the acts in between the production shows. Towards the latter years of the Lido show, when I was there at the time, they used to take, and they do it at the Cirque du Soleil now a little bit, they used to take acrobats. If you remember the Argentinian gauchos, they were just a group of gauchos that were there. They impressed Pierre-Louis Guérin and René Fradet, and who decided to create actually an act for them. They dressed them up, and they created the music, and brought them on stage. And I remember when they worked at rehearsal Lido and in Paris and the old Lido, and when they did the presentation during rehearsals, we were very impressed. But you don't get these acts anymore because there are no clubs anymore where they can perfect their craft and become an international act anymore. As far as the music you're concerned, Jerry, you were saying, the music of the 50s and 60s are totally different to what you would expect as music today. And so if you can't go back and think that you can put a production show such as was done in the 50s and put it on stage now, because the music would just look ridiculous and passé. So all these things together make that the production shows are different. They may come back one way or the other, but they cannot come back in the form that they were. They have to be modernized tremendously.
Yes. Yeah, everything changed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. One last question from Patricia Iannuthi, the Dean of the Libraries.
Hi, I guess I should start by thanking everybody because this has just been totally terrific. I've lived in Las Vegas 10 years and I'm a big fan of this particular time period. I'm very proud of the work that my staff have done to preserve this particular segment of our history. But my question is as a fan, really. When we started digitizing the photographs and the costume designs, and we create these sort of descriptions that you could then go back and search, and we actually have an app for that. So if you went on the App Store, you could get a free download and you could search. And I used to show people how powerful the search engine was by going into the Showgirl costume collection and typing in something like feathers. And I would pull up all these images of these gorgeous designs and gorgeous women in these gorgeous costumes. And I always thought, what was the inspiration for that? You know, where, I wonder, when you talk about finding the materials and the importance of the materials, did you ever, traveling around in wherever you find these items, actually design an entire costume because of some beautiful feather or collection of feathers you saw and said, that's it, and an image comes to your mind?
Yeah, sometimes because I would look at all the fashion magazines to see what was current, and sometimes just the proportion of a strap would set me off on a, tangent. And you have to remember that nothing lives without inspiration. So you have to feel inspiration, whether it's a dance step, a costume design, a piece of music. So yes, a feather, a particular color, can be the inspiration for a whole costume. Yes.
Back to the costume a little bit. I'm just looking on the costumes that were shown here, on the costume that were presented at the Copacabana at the time. And if you look at the difference between the shape of the costumes, the way they dressed and conceived, and the way they were done, like you and Ray Gayan and Bob Mackie, it's a total different design and presentation. If we go back to the production of the shows, you do not have any more people like you that have the breadth of experience of shows or ethnicity or presentation from all around the world. They have not perfected their craft to be able to handle and devise a show as could be done now. We don't have the experience anymore. We don't have the talent anymore because it's so hip hop, it's very so much more limited. There's not that breadth. And maybe Jerry, you want to address that.
Well, yeah, I did shows in Lebanon. I did the Casino de Liban, which was the largest show in the world. It had an international cast. I had to say everything 3 times, French, English, and Italian. I didn't speak any other languages, that was it. And hope that the person standing next to the person that didn't understand me could translate, you know. But it was, Acapulco, Australia. I did huge shows in Australia. But everywhere you go, you learn something, exactly as you're saying. And you gather all of this experience. And every time that you do something and challenge yourself to do something better, it's a continually learning process. Not for 1 minute do you ever sit back on your laurels and say, you know, and phone it in. It's always work, and there's always that moment where you say, why can't I just die? Because this is just too damn hard. But you don't. You manage to go on, and you know, it's why they call it work. But then it's when you work with dancers and talent that's so wonderful, and opening night when the audience is cheering, I mean, it all pays off, yeah.
Well, I have to stop the questions there because I want to give everybody a chance to schmooze a little bit more with Jerry and with each other, and also to go downstairs and see Carla's fabulous exhibit. So on behalf of the Director of Special Collections and the Dean of the Libraries, I want to thank you all for coming, and I especially want to thank our panelists. Especially Jerry, who flew all the way from Los Angeles to be with us this morning. All the way. And of course to my colleague Carla Irwin for her fabulous exhibit. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sue Kim. Fabulous job.